Senju Nargar, a mid-level demon with a unique power, stood at the entrance of a dungeon, surveying the space. "I am Senju Nargar," he muttered to himself. "I summon hands out of empty space. Thanks to my ability, Jit. These hands look nothing like mine, more like monsters. They can cast spells on their own and perform delicate tasks. I can summon 4 at once, but they're hard to control." Still, this power got the attention of Demon Lord Garhelios, who promoted me through the ranks. He recalled the moment when Garhelios had sent him to oversee the Shurjima cave, a dungeon located near the base of the heroes. "This is the first dungeon those brave men will enter," Senju mused. "As the mid-boss, it's my duty to fight them. If I annihilate them here, wouldn't that be funny?" But as he wandered through the dungeon's floors, his initial confidence wavered. The place was in shambles. Unmotivated monsters, crumbling walls, and a general air of abandonment filled the once formidable dungeon. "What is this?" Senju thought, grimacing. "This place looks like it's been left for dead. Even the stairs are falling apart." On the first floor he encountered Poison Slime Isotanto, the guardian of the floor. "Are you the new boss?" the sluggish slime asked. Senju frowned at the state of the floor. "This slime barely moves," he muttered to himself, moving on. The second floor wasn't any better. Fairies and plant monsters, Senju noted. Withered flowers everywhere. Arlon, the fairy in charge, barely paid him any attention. "You don't seem like the mid-boss," she said, flying low with a slow, uninterested demeanor. As Senju continued, he found the third-floor guardian, a vampire named Kuketsu, lounging and drinking blood. The entire dungeon was in chaos, and it became clear to Senju that this dungeon had been neglected for far too long. "This place is ruined," he realized. "If I don't act, it will collapse." Determined to change things, Senju summoned the leaders of the dungeon to a meeting. "I've called you here to tell you that this dungeon is no longer functioning as it should," he announced. "Even misbehaved children walk out unscathed. We're stationed near the hero's base, but we're too far from Demon Lord Garhelios' main army. Supplies are scarce, and if we don't act, the heroes will attack and we'll be destroyed." But the creatures were unimpressed. "Who even is Garhelios?" one muttered. "I've never seen him," another grumbled. "We've been stuck here for years, and now you think you can fix everything?" Frustrated but resolute, Senju clenched his fists. "The Demon Lord accepted me, entrusted this dungeon to me, and there's only one way to fix this," he declared. "I, Senju Nargar, summon my hands. I will turn this dungeon into an impregnable fortress and carve fear into the hearts of the heroes." That night, Senju worked tirelessly, summoning his hands and setting them to task. By morning, the dungeon had undergone a complete transformation. Arlon, the fairy from the second floor, was the first to notice. "What is this?" she exclaimed. "The dry leaves are gone and everything is bright and green. Who did this?" Senju appeared behind her, nonchalant. "I just sprinkled some fertilizer," he said with a smirk. "Look around you, Arlon. Even the fairies have more energy now. This dungeon was once dead, but now it's alive again." Arlon was speechless, glancing around at the revived plants and cheerful fairies. "What would your ancestors say about this?" Senju teased. "Until yesterday, you were sleeping in a corner like a withered vegetable. Now this dungeon has hope." The other dungeon creatures soon realized the changes, and word spread quickly. "The mid-boss did this overnight," they whispered, marveling at the improvements. The dungeon, once forgotten and crumbling, was now on its way to becoming a true fortress under Senju Nargar's leadership. And with this newfound energy, the dungeon awaited the arrival of the heroes, ready to face them head-on. In the deep, shadowy corridors of an ancient, forgotten dungeon, tensions were running high. The monsters and creatures who lived there had gathered in a dimly lit chamber, awaiting orders from their new leader, the mid-boss, who had recently taken command after the mysterious departure of his predecessor. The mid-boss stood at the head of the room, his expression unreadable as he addressed the group. His voice echoed through the cavernous hall as he began. "If you think that just because I'm here, everything will go well, you'd be mistaken." The room fell into an uneasy silence, with some creatures exchanging nervous glances. One of them, a small fairy-like creature, raised their hand timidly. But the dungeon isn't well maintained yet," they stammered. We're barely holding things together as it is. The mid-boss let out a weary sigh, his eyes scanning the room. You've actually done well, considering the circumstances, he admitted. But there's a lot more work ahead. And I also have other troublesome tasks to deal with. A few creatures shifted uncomfortably, but one brave soul spoke up. Elsama, why would you say that? The previous mid-boss didn't even listen to us. He ignored all our concerns. Another chimed in, trying to lighten the mood. Oh wait, maybe Elsama is just being shy. The mid-boss shook his head, his tone turning more serious. You guys, I understand your concerns about the dungeon. I know it's not in the best shape, but there are a lot of things to fix. Look at this. He pulled out a stack of papers, each page filled with detailed plans. It describes how we're going to make this dungeon better. He held the papers up for everyone to see, revealing that they were also filled with simple hand-drawn pictures. I added illustrations because I know some of the fairies can't read. A few creatures chuckled softly, one muttering, "It's not bad." The pictures, that is. The mid-boss set the papers down on a stone table in front of him. But no matter how many hands I have, I can't do all of this alone, he continued, his voice firm. So, I'll leave the rest of the work to you. Wait, one of the creatures called out, their voice rising in panic. Why would you leave it up to me? I can't give orders with pictures alone. These fairies need someone to actually teach them how to grow more plants and maintain the gardens. The mid-boss regarded the speaker calmly. You're far more familiar with plants than I am. I'll leave the fairies and their training to you. As for me, I'll handle the dungeon structure and maintenance. Trust me, it'll all be fine. The creature hesitated but eventually nodded. I'll try. But still, explain this. They waved their arms toward a group of newly hired monster employees who were standing awkwardly in the back of the room. What's going on here? The mid-boss glanced over his shoulder. Those. They're the newly hired monsters. They have a lot of potential, but they're still learning. One of the older creatures scoffed. New monster employees? Such arrogance. This is the result of your pride. And look at Shirjima Cave. Heavily understaffed and falling apart. You've just arrived here. Another creature snapped. You don't know anything about this place. I wasn't even taught my job properly when I got here. The seniors were always so nervous I couldn't say anything. And I was ignored. That's why I decided to leave after just a year. The mid-boss studied them for a moment, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's all the more reason why I'm here now, he said softly. But don't worry. What happened before won't happen again. I'm sure you'll do your best to raise the newcomers this time. That depends on what you do now, the creature muttered, their voice uncertain. How this floor changes. It's all up to me, isn't it? Exactly, the mid-boss said, his tone resolute. Leave the rest to me. I'll manage this floor and ensure everything is in order. But I trust you to handle the fairies and plants. A quiet murmur spread through the room as the mid-boss turned to leave. The creatures exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of their new leader's confidence. Hours passed, and the creatures began to notice changes throughout the dungeon. The entrance hallway, which had been falling apart for months, was now repaired. Dungeon traps that had rusted over were suddenly gleaming with new mechanisms. Even the bathrooms, notorious for their foul odor, now smelled of fresh flowers. Who did this? One of the creatures whispered, awe in their voice. This kind of work couldn't have been done alone. It's the mid-boss, another creature answered. He's been working non-stop. As the changes continued, word spread that the mid-boss had gone to the cafeteria to confront the three goblin brothers who had been running the place for years. Curious, a group of creatures hurried down to the cafeteria to see what would happen next. When they arrived, they found the three goblin brothers, dressed in their chef uniforms, glaring at the mid-boss. Well, look at this, one of the goblins sneered. Isn't it the new mid-boss? Are you here about the budget cuts? The mid-boss didn't flinch. I'm not here to crush anyone, he replied evenly. Oh, then why are you here? The goblin asked suspiciously. The mid-boss's lips curled into a small smile. This is a cafeteria, right? I'm here for some food. For a moment there was stunned silence. Then the goblins broke into laughter. The tension that had filled the room seemed to lift, replaced by an unexpected camaraderie. The mid-boss, it seemed, wasn't there to challenge anyone. but to simply do what was necessary to make the dungeon run smoothly again. As the creatures watched, they realized that perhaps under the leadership of this unusual mid-boss, things really could change for the better. And so with renewed energy they returned to their tasks, determined to improve the dungeon they called home. In a dimly lit, bustling tavern deep in the Goblin realm, a mysterious traveler stumbled through the door, exhausted from a long night of work. "Would you mind?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I've been working all night since yesterday, so would you kindly serve your most recommended dish?" The goblin server, dressed in a worn apron, responded politely, "All right. Please give us some time, dear customer. We will prepare the finest meal we have." The traveler leaned back, anticipation in his eyes. "I'm looking forward to it," he said with a quiet chuckle. After a short wait, the goblin returned holding a steaming dish. "Sorry to keep you waiting. This is our goblin specialty dish. It's a goblin-styled mosunai. I stewed the guts of a six-eyed goat." The traveler's eyes widened. "Six-eyed goat? This is insane." The server beside the goblin chef whispered anxiously, "Bro, stop this. This dish is bubbling. Isn't it fine to just serve the usual?" But the chef refused. "No. I gave him the best dish we have." As the dish was placed in front of the traveler, an overwhelming smell filled the room. One of the other patrons winced. "Damn. It smells like it'll knock anyone out twice over." Another, visibly shaken, muttered, "Elsan, I'm a vampire. This fishy smell is too much." The chef, undeterred, asked, "Are you scared? There's no reason not to eat it. Some people would cry for the chance to try this dish." Surprisingly, the traveler smiled. "Really? I might give it a try then." "What? You're not actually going to?" One of the patrons gasped. Ignoring the commotion, the traveler took a bite. The room fell silent. "He ate it," gasped one of the patrons, his face turning pale. "Oi! Stop! You'll get sick from that," another shouted, alarmed. The traveler, still calm, asked, "Why would I get sick?" He stood up and looked at the goblin chef. "All right, you. Lend me your apron." The goblin was confused. "Oh, me? Am I fired?" "No," the traveler reassured him. "I just want to cook a dish. You have a suitable apron and can you bring me some ingredients? Like horseradish, some mackerel, and a few other things." The chef smirked. "It doesn't matter what you make. Go ahead and struggle." But within minutes, the traveler had prepared a new dish. "It's done," he said, placing it in front of the stunned crowd. This is the six-eyed goat matsuni," the chef gasped. "But it smells different." The traveler smiled confidently. "The only difference is that this dish was made by yours truly." One of the goblin brothers tasted it. "It's not smelly, unlike the earlier stew. This is delicious." The room erupted into cheers as the goblin brothers devoured the dish. "The organs are flavorful and juicy. The balance is perfect. This is definitely a class." The mid-boss goblin, who had been watching in disbelief, muttered, "What kind of magic did this guy use? Smells amazing." A little further away, Q-chan, a nervous bystander, had woken up from the enticing smell. She took a deep breath and swallowed hard. "That scent. It's incredible. You must have used some special ingredients," the goblin chef accused, his pride wounded. The traveler shook his head. "No special ingredients. Everything I used came from the kitchen." "Impossible," the chef shouted. "Nothing in that kitchen could be this good." The traveler shrugged. "I didn't make the dish for you anyway. Q-chan, come here." Q-chan hesitated. "Oh, me? But I'm no good with smelly dishes." The traveler smiled gently. "It's okay. Take your time." And so, Q-chan nervously approached the table, her curiosity overpowering her fear. In the quiet yet bustling dungeon of Shirjima Cave, an unexpected aroma filled the air. "It doesn't smell fishy," someone remarked, their voic. Delicious." Another voice joined in, followed by excited exclamations. "Yum! So delicious! So deli." The sudden outburst caught everyone off guard. Was that the voice of Kyuketsu the vampire? One of the dungeon dwellers asked in shock. "I wonder what could make her voice like that," another mused. Normally, Q-chan's voice was weak and weary, a consequence of her chronic anemia. She was suffering from anemia due to her restrictive diet and lack of someone to feed on. But with the six-eyed goat stew, her condition has improved, someone explained. The stew, packed with abundant nutrients, had evidently worked wonders. So you planned this all along to feed her the stew? Another asked. If that's the case, well, it is what it is, someone else commented. Despite being new, everything seemed to be going great under the watchful eye of the mid-boss, who calmly replied, even though you three brothers are confident in your cooking skills, don't forget about the people you're feeding. You'll be able to make even more delicious dishes together. The brothers, touched by the mid-boss's words, began to cry. Don't be stupid, guys. You shouldn't cry in public. Just manage to make it work. With that, the mid-boss declared, my reforms are complete. The dungeon erupted in cheers. Mid-boss, we like your style. We'll never make goblin-style matsuni again, one of the brothers vowed. You can leave it on the menu, the mid-boss responded nonchalantly. I don't really hate the dish. Meanwhile, life in Shirjima Cave continued to grow more vibrant. A monster who wants to have an interview has arrived, someone announced. The mid-boss nodded. Got it. Please serve them tea while they wait. The dungeon had changed over the past year. With more employees and tasks, even the goblins were on the verge of collapsing from exhaustion. I'll ask the kobolds to help, someone suggested. Every day this place gets busier, someone remarked, admiring the progress. Auron, one of the dungeon's residents, approached the mid-boss, a smile on her face. Has it really been a year? This place has changed so much since I first came here, she said. Back then, even a lost child could wander out of the dungeon unharmed. It was in such a terrible state. She handed over a document. Look, it's a comprehensive summary of the dungeon, written by heroes who once left their castle. Back then, the dungeon was rated at around 6 to 8 levels. But now, it's recommended for parties of over 30 levels. Shirjima Cave has truly become a proper dungeon. The mid-boss chuckled. 30 levels? That would require a mid-level party. That's right. Shirjima Cave is no longer the weak dungeon it once was. Auron laughed. But there was an uneasy tension in the air. When do you think the heroes' party will come? Someone wondered aloud. I'd prefer if they didn't come at all, Auron said cautiously, sitting on a table. Yeah, it's been a year. It's hard to imagine the heroes not attacking this dungeon eventually, someone else added. Are they still staying in their castle? The Demon King's audit will probably come first, someone muttered. Wasn't that scheduled for a month ago? Auron pointed out. The mid-boss, realizing how busy he'd been, frowned. That's strange. No way an audit wouldn't arrive. The conversation took a more serious turn. Has the Demon King forgotten about this dungeon? Or is something else going on? No, the Demon Lord isn't that type of person. I'll check up on it later. The mid-boss reassured them, though a sense of foreboding lingered. Suddenly there was a shout. Alsama! Alsama! The heroes' party is coming. Everyone froze. They've finally decided to come. In the dark, humid depths of Shirjima Cave, tension ran high as the monsters stirred in panic. The news that had just arrived was more shocking than anything they had ever anticipated. To the Demon King, Garhelios, one of the monsters stuttered, his voice trembling. The Demon King Garhelios has been defeated by the heroes' party. He barely managed to get the words out, causing a wave of shock to ripple through the room. What? No way, another gasped, unable to believe what they were hearing. But it was true. The Demon Lord, once feared throughout the land, had been vanquished. And they're coming here next, the first monster continued, his eyes wide with terror. The heroes are heading straight for Shirjima Cave, and their average level is 72. The other monsters froze in horror. Level 72? They had heard legends of heroes this strong, but never had they imagined they would be facing them. This can't be happening, one monster muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. Not only is Garhelios defeated, but the heroes' party is coming for us next? Their level is 72. Far above anything we can handle. Our dungeon is recommended for levels far below theirs. We're doomed. Chaos erupted as monsters scrambled to make sense of the situation. There's no way we can fight them. One shouted. It's the same party that defeated Garhelios. We'll be destroyed. But the news got worse. Reports from the fairies confirmed the heroes would arrive in just 30 minutes. 30 minutes. We're finished. Another monster cried, throwing his hands in the air. One of the monsters standing in the corner clenched his fists. I prepared manuals. I prepared for unexpected situations, but this? He shook his head, pacing back and forth. This scenario doesn't make any sense. Another monster, slightly calmer but still anxious, glanced toward the mid-boss. Mid-boss, you've been getting stronger recently, haven't you? It's been a year since you've taken over here. And now you've got that wonderful slime body. The mid-boss waved him off, clearly unbothered by the compliment. That's not important right now, he snapped. What matters is how the heroes even got here. Heroes with double-digit levels should not be able to enter this cave. What is going on? The other monsters exchanged nervous glances. I thought the same thing, one murmured. There seems to have been some sort of miscalculation. The heroes' party should have passed through Shirjima Cave without even noticing it. Their castle is nearby. Maybe they didn't think we were worth the trouble and just ignored us. But that doesn't make sense, another monster interjected. They're planning to end their journey in Shirjima Cave. They wouldn't ignore this place if they knew it existed. Panic set in once more. This is a disaster. The heroes are coming. And they're level 70. There's no way our slime corp will be able to handle them. The monsters huddled together, trying to think of a plan. One particularly clever monster spoke up. I've got an idea. We've got that obnoxious weed from the second floor, right? When the heroes enter the first floor, we drop the poison on them. Then, I'll lead the undead unit to ambush them. It's a perfect plan. But the mid-boss shook his head. It's not going to work. The hero party is far too strong for that. They likely have resistance to abnormal statuses. And if they have a wise man in their party, one strategic magic attack at the entrance will be enough to destroy the entire cave. We'd be wiped out before we even had a chance to fight. Then what are we supposed to do? Another monster cried out in frustration, looking desperately at the mid-boss. But the mid-boss, unbothered by the panic around him, simply sighed. As of today, I'm done. The boss of Shirjima Cave is now Arlon. The monster stared at him in shock. What? Are you just going to run away and leave everything to Arlon? One of them shouted, disbelief in their voice. You're the worst. How can you do this? You're abandoning us. The mid-boss shrugged. I was never meant to be a mid-boss. I'm leaving. The room fell silent as the mid-boss turned and walked away, leaving his subordinates behind. One monster, still stunned by his betrayal, shouted after him. I won't forgive you for this, mid-boss. You're abandoning us at the worst possible time. But the mid-boss didn't even look back. I have nothing to say, he muttered as he disappeared into the shadows. Now how do I deal with this overtime work? As soon as he was gone, the remaining monsters exploded into frustration and disbelief. I can't believe this. He ran away at a time like this. What kind of mid-boss leaves his dungeon and abandons his subordinates? One monster shouted, fists clenched in anger. We're fools. We trusted him. And now he's left us to face the heroes on our own. Arlon, now left in charge, remained silent, deep in thought. One of the monsters suddenly noticed something strange. Hey Arlon. What's that on your shoulder? Arlon looked down and realized she was holding a small bell. Oh, this? It's a resonating bell. They come in pairs. If you ring one, the other one rings no matter how far away it is. The mid-boss gave you that bell? Why would he do that? Another monster asked, confused. Where's the other bell? Arlon shrugged. I don't know. It's probably hidden somewhere far away. But it doesn't matter now. But something about the bell nagged at her. Wait a minute, she murmured, her mind racing. There's only one entrance to Shirjima Cave. The heroes are coming through that entrance. There's no way out. Suddenly, the realization hit her like a lightning bolt. No way, the mid-boss. She gasped. Outside the cave, the mid-boss stood alone, a barrier forming at the entrance. It's been a while since I've used this, but it still works, he said to himself, his voice calm. This barrier will take even the demon lord half a day to break through. The heroes won't be able to enter or leave for hours. He turned to glance back at the cave. A mid-boss waiting outside his dungeon isn't unheard of, but I'm not exactly a mid-boss anymore. He smirked to himself, a sense of satisfaction settling over him. I wonder what kind of boss Arlon will become. I'm sure she'll do great. As the heroes' party drew closer, the mid-boss stood firm, prepared for what was to come. This is fine, he muttered to himself. Brave heroes. This is my last big job after all. I am Senju Narger, the one who now controls this dungeon. And with that he waited, ready for the final battle. In the dim light of the dungeon, tension filled the air as the heroes gathered. The leader of the Bronze Sword Party, a band known for defeating the infamous Demon King, stood tall, surveying the dark shadows that flickered at the edges of their torchlight. I see. We are the ones who defeated the Demon King, he proclaimed, pride swelling in his chest. The Bronze Sword Party. There were demons who dared to give their names to us. Grants, a fierce warrior of the party, shouted back. I'm going to bash your head in if you don't lower your voice. His impatience was palpable, a reflection of the chaotic energy around them. It's the samurai. Another member interjected, shaking his head. Haven't I gone through this already? Declare their names. Are you not a wise man? One of the demons taunted, eyes glinting with mockery. It seems that wise man isn't dependable. There's a limit to this bantering. Guys, that doesn't matter. Grants retorted, his voice steady despite the noise around him. There's only one more piece of garbage left for me to throw away. Seems there's another guy who is more volatile than that wise man, muttered Bernhard, the tension thickening as their adversaries shifted. Did they forget about my existence? One of the demons growled, frustration evident in his voice. Anyway, I want to pay tribute to our barbarian. He was injured to protect his subordinates. I challenge you. Even though we know you will lose, someone whispered, but the bravado was infectious. Sir, another member shouted, all demons must be purged, body and soul. The air crackled with energy, pressure mounting as a powerful figure stepped forward. This feeling of pressure, I can't think of it coming from a wise man, Grants observed. The wise man who should be on their logistical support is actually their spear. It's been a long time since I've seen that. Narger, shouted one of the heroes, admiration tinged with caution. I admire your spirit of protecting subordinates. But demons have souls incompatible with this world. As long as you're a demon, even if you bet your life to protect others, we will destroy you. In short, another hero chimed in. After defeating me, your next step is to eradicate the monsters in the dungeon? Of course, Narger declared, standing firm. I'll ask you only once, surrender. Never, the demon spat defiantly. We can't allow demons to live. Now, there's no more need for talk. Just perish. Grants roared, raising his weapon. Grants! It's too wasteful to spend the maximum amount of magic on an opponent of that degree, another party member cautioned. This is to show my greatest respect. Let this black sun evaporate everything. It'll even destroy your broken soul. Is that black flare a legendary magic for a wise man over level 70? With one blow, it'll burn the terrain that even a senior dragon would turn to ashes, a demon pondered, his confidence wavering. I see he's not a total muscle brain. Even the demon king Garhelios won't be safe if hit by this, one of the heroes remarked, steeling himself. Be prepared. Do it. Do it. The others shouted, anticipation mounting. Would you mind if I prepare my goodbyes? The demon asked, a sly smile playing on his lips. Do whatever you like. I'll wait for 3 seconds. Grants replied, his grip tightening around his weapon. I have an unusual way of saying goodbyes, the demon said, raising his hands in a strange gesture. What? What are those hands? Someone exclaimed. Quickly withdraw your black flare. Grants. As expected, that hero's reaction is quick. But I guess that's their limit, the demon chuckled, channeling his power. Graviton. Ga-awea. Just what is with this gravity magic? Grant screamed, struggling against the invisible force that pushed down on him. My black flare is falling down on me. Wait. That's why I said I wasn't a good vessel to act as a mid-boss. He shouted, panic creeping into his voice. By the way, you haven't answered my previous question yet, the demon continued, a grin spreading across his face. Isn't it sloppy? A subordinate is much stronger than his boss. Will you surrender? The air hung heavy with uncertainty. the outcome of the battle teetering on a knife's edge as both sides prepared for the inevitable clash. In a world where magic and myth intertwined, there was a place few dared to even whisper about, the Tower of the World. To most, it was the stuff of legends spoken of in hushed tones, but to a select few high-ranking demons, including the mighty demon Lord Garhelios, it was real. This tower, concealed from the world by powerful mythical-class magic, was said to house an existence far greater than even the demon lord himself, an entity known as the Overlord. The tower was the true final dungeon, a bastion of unspeakable power and terror. Stretching impossibly high into the sky, it consisted of 70 floors, each guarded by monstrous entities that could easily tear apart any intruders who dared ascend. It was said that no human should ever find the tower, for those who did would face unimaginable peril. To reach the pinnacle where the Overlord resided, challengers would need to be at least level 90, with a magic resistance of level 8 or higher, for only then could they even hope to survive the onslaught within. The guardians of the tower, known as floor guardians, were creatures of terrifying power. Kutsuki, the guardian of the first floor, crawled in the darkness, his body dripping with sulfuric acid, a grotesque pet of the Overlord. If a being like Kutsuki ever left the tower, it was said the world would crumble within a week. But the tower's magic kept its monsters imprisoned, ensuring that these abominations would never escape to wreak havoc on the world. Deeper within the tower, on the 64th floor, another guardian waited, Senju Narger, a being of overwhelming strength at level 99. He, like the other guardians, was restless, growing bored as he waited for a calamity that might never come. The guardians were trapped in a timeless vigil, their only purpose to defend the tower against any who dared to approach the Overlord. Yet, despite his immense power, Senju Narger was not content with simply guarding the floor. His ambitions had led him beyond the tower, where he caught the eye of the demon Lord Garhelios and was appointed as the mid-boss of Shirjima Cave. How he achieved this honor was a story in itself, one he promised to tell another day. But now, in the heart of battle, there were more immediate concerns. Grants, the strongest of the wise men, had been killed, cut down by a single spell. The sheer absurdity of it shook Bernhard, the warrior at the center of the fight. How could this have happened, he muttered, his mind racing. Grants had been struck down with one spell, a blow so powerful it shattered all expectations. Don't lose your composure, Bernhard, someone called out, snapping him back to the present. But the shock lingered. His enemy, seemingly a mere dungeon boss, had revealed hidden depths, an underhanded trick that no one had expected. The spell he cast, Graviton, was not only rare but immensely powerful, its magic swirling like a black flare in the air. By all accounts, his opponent should have been exhausted, his magic drained, but somehow, he continued to fight. Even in the heat of battle, Bernhard couldn't help but acknowledge the skill of his opponent. A surprise attack. I'll give you credit for that, he growled, gritting his teeth. But this was far from over. There's no way you can take us down now. Without magic, you're nothing but dregs at the bottom of a teacup. He stepped forward, his voice cold and steady, though the truth was that fear gnawed at the edges of his mind. His opponent laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the chamber. Scared, are we? It's too late for fear now. You're going to die, demon. Bernhard could hear the confidence in the enemy's voice, but he refused to give in. Summoning all his strength, Bernhard began casting an acceleration spell, one of the most advanced forms of magic he knew. Multicasting. Accelerate, accelerate, accelerate. Maximum acceleration. The spell wrapped around him, and time seemed to bend as his muscles surged with energy. This wasn't just simple muscle enhancement. It was a spell that allowed him to move faster than the eye could follow, a power strong enough to change the flow of time itself. He charged forward, aiming for a decisive blow. But his opponent was ready. A hand shot out from the shadows, stopping his attack cold. What? Bernhard gasped in shock. She didn't die from that hit. Her defense. It's unbelievable. For a brief moment he hesitated. His enemy was no ordinary magician. The summoner controlled grotesque hands that appeared out of thin air, monstrous appendages that had been with her since childhood. She laughed again, her voice dripping with malice. You think your strength will save you? It's pointless. No matter how powerful you are, if I can hit your main body, it's over. Bernhard's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. The longer the battle dragged on, the less logical it became. His opponent's power seemed endless, her magic unnatural. He gritted his teeth, determined to keep fighting, even if the odds were stacked against him. "It's time for you to disappear, demon," he shouted, readying his final attack. But then the summoner's laughter rang out again, mocking him. "Summoner, you say? Ha! You're more naive than I thought. This is no ordinary summoning magic." The fight, already strange and chaotic, grew even more bizarre. The summoner seemed to defy all rules of magic that Bernhard understood. And in that moment he realized something deeper was at play. His mind flickered back to the legends of the tower, where beings with unimaginable power toyed with reality itself. Was this creature truly from that place? Had he, unwittingly, stumbled upon one of the Overlord's chosen? "Foolish," the summoner hissed. "We are the legendary hero party that defeated the evil demon king. Do you really think you stand a chance?" Her words cut through the tension like a blade, and Bernhard felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. And as the divine light swirled around them, he realized this was no ordinary battle. This was a battle against fate itself, a clash between powers that should never have crossed paths. In the end, Bernhard knew only one side could emerge victorious. In the deep, dark recesses of the Shurjima cave, the clatter of footsteps echoed as the hero ventured deeper into the dungeon. His sword was drawn, shimmering faintly in the dim torchlight, and his breath came in sharp gasps. The oppressive air of the dungeon, thick with the scent of mildew and forgotten battles, weighed on him. "If I were just an average monster," the hero muttered to himself, his heart racing, "I would have turned to dust by that swing." His gaze hardened, filled with determination, as he approached the final chamber. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he pressed on. "This sword, it won't move?" His brow furrowed in disbelief, pulling at the hilt of his sword with all his might. "I'm the chosen one. The hero chosen by the gods. Why?" Frustration swelled in his chest. "I defeated the demon lord. I brought peace to this world." His voice grew louder, echoing through the cavernous dungeon. "The applause of the fools in my hometown is waiting for me. I'll return, gloriously and triumphantly. I'm the hero." He grit his teeth, his muscles straining as he tried to lift the blade once more, but it remained stuck. A slow, mocking voice slithered out from the shadows. "If you hadn't made that detour," the voice mused, almost leisurely, "you would have been drinking fine sake in your village by now, boasting about your so-called heroic deeds." The hero whipped around, scanning the dark corners of the dungeon for the source of the voice. "Who's there? Show yourself." A figure stepped forward into the flickering light. His presence was foreboding yet eerily calm. The hero's eyes widened, recognizing him. "Your arrival here was unnecessary," the figure continued, his voice steady. "You could have spent the rest of your days in peace." "Unnecessary?" The hero scoffed, glaring at the figure before him. "Are you seriously telling me that?" His blood boiled. "I don't need a reason to destroy this dungeon." His voice thundered as he pointed his sword toward the enemy. "I'm the hero. I've defeated countless monsters, saved countless lives." The figure, still calm, let out a small, almost bored sigh. "As a mid-boss, I've seen my share of overzealous heroes. You're nothing special." The hero's grip on his sword tightened. "Shut up. I'm not someone who dies in some godforsaken dungeon without a soul to witness my glory." His voice wavered with both rage and fear. "I'm the hero. The world knows my name." His breath came quicker, his heart pounding in his chest. The mid-boss, a tall, imposing figure with cold eyes, crossed his arms. "Thank you for your many self-introductions," he said dryly, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let me reintroduce myself then. I am Senju Narger, the former mid-boss of Shurjima Cave." He spoke slowly, deliberately. "My special ability? It allows me to summon 5 hands, each capable of casting powerful magic." The hero's eyes widened in disbelief. That's impossible. A mid-boss shouldn't have that kind of power." Senju's face remained impassive. "Oh, but I do." His voice was calm, yet there was an underlying bitterness. "Unlike you, I don't have anyone to witness my death, nor do I deserve one. I envy you, hero." The hero blinked, surprised by the sudden shift in tone. Envy me? His voice faltered. Yes, you, Senju said, looking down at the hero with cold eyes. He was weaker than me, but he had something I didn't. Someone was always by his side. His voice grew quieter, almost wistful. Everyone gathered around him, whether they were his enemies or allies. People flocked to him, and yet, I've always been alone. Senju's gaze drifted as he spoke, as if recalling memories from long ago. When I was a floor guardian, I sat on an empty throne, in the middle of a desolate, lonesome floor. Even now, facing the hero's party, I'm still standing here alone. The hero, despite his anger, felt a pang of empathy. There was something about Senju's words that struck a chord in him. Senju continued, if they knew I was going to fight the hero's party, would they have rushed to my side? Gunso, the poisonous slime, is busy training the newcomers. Kyuketsu commanding the dungeon troops too. Even Arlon. She's been entrusted with leadership in my absence. He shook his head. No, none of them would help me now. I've severed those ties long ago. The hero's sword slowly lowered. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. Senju sighed, his voice softening once again. I aspired to be more than this, to be a true boss. It wasn't such a bad dream. I wasn't always alone. Once I was surrounded by others. It wasn't a terrible experience. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. But traditions, those old traditions from a bygone era, they can't be changed so easily. And for a dungeon like Shirjima to survive, repelling heroes like you should have been a task shared by all of us. His voice hardened once again. But because of my immaturity as a mid-boss, this was the only way to do it. The hero swallowed, his throat dry. Senju's eyes bore into him. Will you surrender? He asked, his tone dark and final. Or will we fight? The hero stood frozen for a moment, then raised his sword. I'll never surrender, he growled. Not to someone like you. Senju sighed once more, as though tired of the conversation. Very well. I suppose we'll have to fight. He raised his hands, and in an instant magical chains burst forth, wrapping around the hero with incredible speed. The hero gasped, struggling to break free, but the chains held him fast. What is this? The hero gasped, his voice filled with panic. Senju stepped closer, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. These chains are a commandment from the gods themselves. During their time they held the heavens and the earth apart. And now they will hold you. He looked down at the struggling hero, his expression unreadable. The hero thrashed, but the chains only tightened their grip. Why? He gasped, eyes wide in fear and disbelief. Senju stared down at him, unmoved. A hero, huh? You had your chance. But in this dungeon, where the gods' chains rule, your fate was sealed the moment you stepped inside. With one final despairing gasp, the hero fell silent, the chains binding him completely. The dungeon once again was still, save for the quiet footsteps of Senju Nargor retreating into the darkness. In the depths of a dark forest, a young boy named Nargoa found himself clutching a strange, burning dagger. His entire body was engulfed in a searing heat, pain shooting through him as he tried to comprehend what was happening. Hot! Why is this dagger so hot? He gasped, wincing. My whole body is burning up. It hurts. What the hell is with this dagger? Suddenly, a voice interrupted his frantic thoughts. You've let your guard down, it said smugly. Nargoa spun around just as a figure in a cloak stepped out from the shadows. The cloaked figure smirked, holding a weapon of his own. I finally landed a hit on you. Who are you? Nargoa stammered, his eyes narrowing. Have we met before? The figure seemed amused by the question. I'm not upset about this turn of events, he said, his voice calm. Even though it doesn't look like it, the others haven't noticed the robed man yet. Those are God's divine chains you're looking at. The heroes couldn't see it because of its holy aura. Nargoa's eyes widened in shock. Divine chains? How did a human get their hands on something like that? He knew he had made a mistake. If he had only looked closer, he would have noticed sooner. The figure chuckled. You still don't know who I am. His voice turned mocking. I'm sad, senpai. I've always looked up to you. Senpai. Nargoa repeated, bewildered. You're a floor guardian? No way. Yup, the figure confirmed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. But I hoped you'd at least remember my name. Nargoa's mind raced as he tried to piece everything together. Why would a floor guardian be with the heroes' party? And why target me, he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. His heart sank as the realization hit him. I just realized, the cloaked figure said softly. Senpai is all alone. In the end, no one understands Senpai. No one acknowledges Senpai. Nargoa's breath caught in his throat as the figure stepped closer, his eyes glowing with a strange admiration. Only I can understand you, Senpai, the figure said with a chilling smile. And only I will admire you forever. The figure stepped back, his voice growing distant. So, let's meet again after 100 years, Senpai. Nargoa stared in confusion as the figure disappeared into the forest, his parting words echoing in his mind. My nickname was Crybaby Nargoa, the figure had said. I wasn't a crybaby though. Only Rigard and his friends called me that. The memories flooded back. Rigard, the village bullies, their endless harassment. They'd always found a reason to torment him. Even now, Nargoa could hear their cruel voices. They would tie me up, beat me during their so-called training. They'd even hurt the village chief's dog and blame it on me. Nargoa's heart ached as he recalled the darkness of those days. Rigard had never let him be. But this time was different. They had left him tied up in the forbidden forest, far from the village. Why does Rigard only harass me? Nargoa thought to himself. Maybe it's because I got along too well with Timura. Timura Rayart, his childhood friend with beautiful red hair, had always been by his side. They had been inseparable since they were little. Guess we can't take baths together anymore. Nargoa mused bitterly. It'd be crazy if everyone in the village knew. Does Rigard like Tamura-chan, he wondered. The thought had crossed his mind before, but no one would believe such a wild claim. That's why the bullying started, Nargoa realized. He hated seeing me with Tamura-chan. You can get married to Tamura-chan, he'd say, taunting me. Lately, Nargoa's mother had warned him to stay away from the forest. So this is the forbidden forest, he muttered under his breath. I've heard the rumors, beast-type monsters, water spirits with strong magic, even a high-class monster called Arachne. Nargoa shivered. I need to get home quickly, he thought. But I'm a summoner. I can summon monsters by drawing magic circles. He glanced at his tightly bound hands. Not in this state, though. And what can a level 3 kid like me even summon? A slime. His stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. Every step he took, the forest seemed to close in around him, each tree looking more and more alike. Dad, he whispered, fear creeping into his voice. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled through the woods. Suddenly, a familiar voice pierced the silence. Nargoa-kun. Tamura-chan. Nargoa cried out, his heart pounding in his chest. He rushed forward, barely able to make out her figure through the trees. You see, Timura began, her voice trembling. I was just looking for my friend, Nargoa-kun. Nargoa's thoughts raced. Did you see them dragging me to the forest? Did you follow me here? Before Timura could respond, a massive creature emerged from the shadows, a towering figure with the body of a bear and the head of an owl. Nargoa's eyes widened in terror. There's no mistaking it, he breathed. The Lord of Matawashi Forest. The owl bear. In the heart of a dense, mysterious forest known as the Forbidden Forest, two figures stood amidst the eerie mist, Nargoa and Timura. Timura's face was pale, fear clear in her eyes. Are you all right, Tamura-chan? Nargoa asked with genuine concern in his voice. But before she could respond, a chilling laugh echoed through the air. A looming figure emerged, grinning maliciously. Please stop, Nargoa-kun. Timura cried out. You'll be killed. The figure chuckled darkly. Such a brave kid, but don't worry, the figure said mockingly. I'm not going to keep either of you here. This is my great labyrinth, the Forbidden Forest. No one has ever come back alive from here. Nargoa, trembling slightly, stood his ground. His hands were bound, but his determination was unwavering. I'm scared, but... Timura stammered, but Nargoa interrupted, trying to reassure her. You don't look scary at all, Tamura-chan. I will protect you. The figure sneered. Oh, and how do you plan to draw a magic circle with your hands like that? The figure taunted. Nargoa's hands were tied, his options limited. It can't be helped, Nargoa muttered under his breath. But before he could act, the figure lunged, chanting wind cutter. In a swift motion, Nargoa's hands were cut off. Blood poured from Nargoa's wounds. "Yuwa!" he screamed in pain. "I'll die." "No, Nargoa-kun," Timura shouted desperately. But the figure only laughed again. "Hoo-hoo, I wondered what kind of monster you would have summoned. But I couldn't let you draw a magic circle." The forest floor was now drenched in blood. As Nargoa clung to life, he murmured softly, "Summon," but nothing came. Only a puddle of blood surrounded him. The figure was amused. "What's that?" "Who? What? Why, you're not just a kid? Who are you?" Nargoa lifted his head. The agony in his eyes replaced with an eerie calm. "I'm the Thousand Hands, Nargoa." The figure's amusement quickly turned to confusion. "What an interesting situation," it mused. "I'm definitely human," Nargoa continued. "But I remember the decade I spent as a human boy. And yet, I also have memories as Thousand Hands Nargoa." Timura's voice trembled. "Nargoa-kun, what are you talking about? Your hands, you're bleeding." Nargoa's breath became labored. "With this amount of blood loss, I'll die in a few seconds," he muttered. The figure mocked him. "Looks like you've gone mad in your despair. Ho you ho. Human blood is red after all." It continued its taunts. The summoning ritual was a failure. You can only summon your hands. But then something miraculous happened. Nargoa's severed hands began to reattach themselves. "Who? Your hands, they're sticking back together." Timura gasped in disbelief. Nargoa stood tall, his hands fully regenerated. "Look, they're already perfect," he said, flexing his fingers. "Impossible," the figure gasped. "You have enough mana to regenerate cut-off hands. Even for a high-class monster, that's unheard of." With a cold smile, Nargoa met the figure's gaze. "Make sure to aim better next time." The figure, now enraged, attacked again. "Wind cutter. Jackpot. I've taken the girl's neck," it declared triumphantly. But to its surprise, Timura was unharmed. The figure's face twisted in shock. "What's with that surprised look? Could it be that you didn't see properly?" "I returned the strike with a single flick." Nargoa, now fully in control, felt an unfamiliar emotion: protection. "It's strange," he said softly, "that I'm protecting humans, but she was always with Crybaby Nargoa. And above all, Crybaby Nargoa is still inside me." He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the figure. "Aim at me again," he challenged. "Didn't you hear me telling you to aim better?" His voice was steady, his resolve unbreakable. "I have a strong urge to protect her. If not, it'll be my turn to take your neck." The figure hesitated, realizing that it was no longer in control of the situation. In the heart of Matawashi Forest, panic spread among the villagers as they caught sight of the legendary old boar, known for his fierce strength and cunning. Rumors of his might had circulated through the village for generations, and now many believed he was an invincible force. "Even the adults in the village can't defeat that beast," a young villager exclaimed, his voice trembling as he urged his friend Inargo-kun to flee. But Inargoa stood firm, his resolve unwavering. "This is the strongest warrior in my forest. No more holding back," he shouted defiantly, his heart pounding with anticipation. The old boar, though thin and worn from years of battles, raised his head, a glint of determination in his eyes. "You should rest a bit." "I was going to adjust my strength, but," he began, his voice steady despite his fatigue. The villagers around him were awestruck, but Inargoa's excitement remained palpable. "Old boar, I didn't think you'd be injured," Inargoa declared, stepping closer, trying to gauge the legendary creature's condition. "Who are you to defeat me with a single blow?" A shadowy figure called out, emerging from the trees, the air crackling with tension. The figure stood tall, clad in armor that shimmered ominously in the dappled sunlight. "I am Thousand Hands Inargoa, former dungeon manager," Inargoa declared boldly, his chest puffed out with pride, trying to project an air of confidence despite the intimidating presence before him. "Manager, you say? You're just a human. How do you know about the dungeon inspection?" The figure scoffed, skepticism lacing his tone as he sized Inargoa up. The villagers looked on, unsure of what to expect next. "The attack on my mind is pointless. I am the forest's ruler," Inargoa retorted, his confidence growing as he felt the weight of the old boar's legacy behind him. Old boar interjected. He doesn't have the energy to fight anymore. Today is just a coincidence. Usually we have the right staff. He cast a weary glance at Enargoa, willing him to find the right words. The shadowy figure crossed his arms unimpressed. But you handle precious monsters poorly. Did you know the king eased taxes on merchants? A prosperous city attracts stronger adventurers. Enargoa's brow furrowed. Let's say the average adventurer level jumps to 7. What's your plan? He pressed, feeling the pressure mount around him. Enargoa faltered, glancing nervously at Old Boar, who nodded in encouragement. He stammered, feeling the heat of the moment. You really have no countermeasures, the figure laughed, the sound echoing through the trees. Why, we're understaffed. Enargoa protested, desperation creeping into his voice as he glanced around at the villagers who were counting on him. Then why don't you treat your excellent subordinate well? The figure challenged, pointing an accusatory finger at Enargoa, who looked back at Old Boar with a mix of guilt and determination. Old Boar sighed heavily, his voice tinged with sadness. I've worked here for 40 years with nowhere else to go. My loyalty to this forest is unwavering, even in the face of danger. Work does not continue without reward. Enargoa insisted, his eyes shining with determination. Happiness and rewards keep the job going. It's about recognizing the efforts of talented workers like you. Old Boar, feeling inspired by Enargoa's words, nodded. I will follow this person. I will not be exploited any longer, he declared, his voice steady, filled with renewed resolve. Is there a better opportunity? The shadowy figure asked, worry creeping into his expression, realizing the potential loss of his ally. It's better than this kind of hell. Old Boar replied fiercely, determination flashing in his eyes. Don't be silly. I'm the lord of this forest, the figure shouted, anger flaring in his chest as he realized he was losing control of the situation. Old Boar and Enargoa stood side by side, ready to defend their home against any threat. With a mighty roar, Old Boar prepared for battle. Ho ho! I will chop everyone up, he bellowed, a chilling threat that echoed through the trees. I will not surrender, the shadowy figure retorted defiantly, his gaze unwavering as he drew his weapon, preparing for a clash of titans. As the battle raged on, the forest echoed with their clashing wills. Enargoa summoned his strength, determined to protect Old Boar and their home. They moved as a coordinated force, Enargoa shouting instructions while Old Boar unleashed his formidable power. It became evident that they were a formidable team, ready to face any challenge together. With each strike, Old Boar's strength began to resonate, and Enargoa found himself tapping into his experience as a dungeon manager, devising strategies to outmaneuver their foe. The figure realized he was facing not just a simple creature, but a legacy that had endured for decades. In the end, Enargoa's courage and Old Boar's resilience created a bond that would not easily be broken. They had stood against the odds and emerged stronger, united by their shared purpose, to safeguard Matawashi Forest from any who dared to threaten it. Together they vowed to protect their home and the creatures within, forging a legend that would be spoken of for generations to come. The forest, once a place of fear, now thrummed with life and hope, as the villagers watched their heroes reclaim their strength and resolve, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As expected from someone who had been a servant for 40 years, Old Bear insisted on escorting me home through the eerie Matanashi forest, even though night had fallen. The dense trees loomed around us, casting long shadows that danced in the flickering light of our torches. Am I shaking too much? I asked, trying to mask my nervousness. The forest had a reputation for being haunted, and I felt a chill creeping up my spine. Please let me know if you're uncomfortable, Old Bear replied, his voice steady and reassuring. I'm fine, I reassured him, though my heart raced with each rustle of leaves. That's what you said, he chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Sorry for making you worry. Even if I'm getting old, I can at least do this much, he insisted, a hint of pride in his voice. I glanced at him and thought he looked far from old. You don't look so old, I said, trying to boost his spirits. From now on, I won't have to stay in that tiring atmosphere, he said, referring to his old workplace. I'm lucky to be freed from that burden. I hope the others are managing. Do you think your former workplace still remains after everything? I asked, curious. Let's meet again after 100 years, he joked, his eyes twinkling. As we walked, I noticed how much Old Bear had changed. You're the only one who seems to have grown up, I said with a smile. It's normal to feel that way, especially since I remember my life as Thousand Hands Nargoa, I replied, recalling the memories that had returned to me recently. I'm sorry for everything you had to experience because of me, he said, his tone turning serious. I wanted to help, but instead I was helped. Why are you apologizing? I asked, confused. I'm just glad you came to find me. I was terrified. My blood ran cold when you didn't show up. Timura, I just didn't want you to get hurt, he replied softly, and I could see the sincerity in his eyes. Nothing. Nargoa-kun, I stammered, realizing how much I had relied on him. Somehow you've changed, I noted, still unsure how to express my thoughts. Really? That's right. Yeah, I have changed, he admitted. But this isn't normal for a kid who's only 10 years old. My memories as a demon returned to me, and it has changed me this much. If I make a wrong move, people will think something has taken over me. Don't tell anyone in the village what you saw today. I have a request, Timura. All right, but why? I asked, puzzled. Rigurd would be livid if he knew. It would be troublesome if the others found out. Is that so? Sure. I won't tell anyone. I promised, relieved that I could help in some way. As we neared the village, I could smell smoke and hear voices. What's going on? I smell a lot of people and fire, I said, realizing they must have come to look for us. I'm sorry, but can you drop us off here? I suggested. It would be confusing if they see us together, Old Bear. Thank you, Uncle Wildboar, Old Bear said with a nod before we parted ways. As we entered the village, our friends rushed toward us, relief washing over their faces. Nargoa, are you all right? They shouted. Yes, I'm fine, I replied, feeling overwhelmed by their concern. I was so worried, one of them exclaimed, and I could see the worry etched in their faces. Crybaby Nargoa must be really happy to enter the Madanashi forest in the middle of the night to play. Someone joked, trying to lighten the mood. Really, I was worried. I insisted, feeling defensive. You even took Timur with you. What would have happened if Rigurd hadn't told me? Just then Rigurd appeared, a smug expression on his face. What a huge fuss this late at night. Nargoa is already 10 and still has no sense at all, someone scoffed. It's not like that, I protested. It's all right, Timur, I said, trying to keep the peace. Even my parents believe in that scumbag Rigurd. I yelled, my frustration boiling over. While we were still trapped in the forest, you gladly set them up like this. Damn it, Rigurd. If that passion was put to good use, it would be possible to achieve anything you want, I exclaimed. This is all my fault, I admitted, feeling the weight of the situation. Even if you made a mistake, it's not your fault, Timur reassured me. Remember this later, Rigurd. For making everyone worried, I'm so. Suddenly, the torches went out, plunging us into darkness. So dark. What's happening? I shouted, panic rising in my chest. Did you just hear something? Someone whispered, fear evident in their voice. What is that? I murmured, feeling something unsettling in the air. That thing's attracted to light. Huh? Old Bear said, his expression grim. As the brilliant aftermath of our adventures began to swallow the village whole, I realized this night would be one we'd never forget.